How's it feel? How's it feel to have that thing trained on you again?
Henry, it feels delightful. Well, one of the things I've observed is one of the interesting questions for all of us in life is how much from your early years do you really remember in your own memory as opposed to you saw a picture. So I figure my real consciousness was maybe at 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But to be relatively unimaginative and do it chronologically, I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I thought that was the only place. I think the farthest I ever went was into just over the border into Philadelphia, which was scary, of course, because that's a dangerous town.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be careful what I say here because I grew up.
Where were you born?
I was born in Rahway, New Jersey.
What kind of town is Rahway?
Rahway is a rough manufacturing town. It had a prison in it, but the hospital that my parents had me birthed at was in Rahway, New Jersey. But at that time, my parents were living in a rented house in Westfield, New Jersey, on Scotch Plains Avenue. I remember nothing of that. We moved to Mountainside, New Jersey I was born in 1938, moved to Mountainside across US 22, which was the second most heavily traveled road in the United States at that particular time, between Philadelphia and New York City. Moved across US 22 into Mountainside, which was on a mountainside. And I grew up there, probably lower middle class to lower middle class. But I didn't have any perspective about that. In fact, when I look back, the only 2 things I really wanted to have that I never had was I wanted to have a tree hut or tree fort.
The bomber.
I had the bomber on the ground, but I wanted one in the tree. And then I wanted to have a Lionel train, and we didn't have a train.
A Lionel train?
Well, an electric train to go around the Christmas tree. Didn't have one. And I grew up in a happy home. I had a brother who was 5 years older. My parents were lovely people, caring, not overly expressive, which was part of the temperament of the time, I think. I don't ever remember my father, and I don't say this regretfully or blamefully, if that's, or in a blaming manner.
Yeah.
My father never told me he was proud of me, or he loved me, or he never hugged me. If I would get a handshake out of him later on when the roles reversed, when he was elderly and infirmed, I would go in and hug him, and I'd tell him I loved him, but he couldn't say it. But I never doubted that he did. Just
Right.
Girls say I love you, guys don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Guys go, hey, how you doing, buddy? And especially in New York, New Jersey,
Yeah.
which was a backslapping.
Do you think it had anything to do with the way your dad was brought up?
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
My father grew up in a very stern farm background in rural Virginia. A picture of my grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, was a very stern man. He was the grandfather named Champ, and yet he was 5'3". And I always reflected what a terrible burden that must have been. Because I don't care what year it was, you got to believe he got beat up.
5'3", that's like Isabel's height, you know?
Yeah. I played, I went to Mountainside Grammar School, K through 8. I peaked academically. I was valedictorian in my class when I graduated. I played all the sports. We played interscholastically amongst 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Mm-hmm. In fact, we won a regional championship in basketball in 1951, I think, 50 or 51. I had a really happy time. I rode my bike every place. The bike I bought from my paper route myself, I paid like $56 for my Schwinn bike with chrome fenders, a horn in the belly of the bike,
Really?
a headlight on the front bumper, and a rack on the back. And within 1 week of buying that bike, and balloon tires, within 1 week of buying that bike, because I lived in a hilly town, the rack was off, the headlight was off, the horn was off, the fenders were off. I just stripped the bike because every ounce of weight was a killer going up to my house. The other thing I did, which is kind of interesting, I hitchhiked all over the place. That was very common then. My parents were, safety minded, but I never was admonished by my mother or my father not to hitchhike.
Well, I mean, how old were you when you were doing this?
Probably 12 and older.
Yeah. 12. Oh my gosh.
Take the thumb out.
Called Child Protective Services.
It was a less
days.
scary time in terms of what people expected, so people stopped. And half the people that picked me up I knew.
Mm-hmm.
We played a lot in this. We played in the woods behind the house and behind other people's houses, building huts or forts. That was a big deal. And most of the ad hoc sports that we played out in the street. We played two-man football or two-man baseball, and it would be, go down to the street light pole, come on back. And my brother was always the quarterback or the pitcher, and I was always the guy that ran out for the long pass. And but I remember that as really a lot of fun. When those few times we would have snow, we would sled down Partridge Run, which is the street I lived down, which was a fairly steep hill, on my flexible flyer, and run and belly flop on it. You know what belly flop is?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were no toboggans at that particular time, and never ran into a car, but that was fun. I wore knickers to school with Argyle socks. We had forced air heat from fuel oil in the house. Remember, in the morning, the house was kept very cold at night for financial reasons. Getting up and getting dressed, sitting on the floor and sitting next to the heater and pulling my knickers on and pulling up my Argyle socks. And my mother made me a lunch every day, packed in a little brown bag I carried to school. And I always brought my bag back after I had finished my lunch. I would fold the bag, stick it in my rear pocket and bring it back, and my mother would use the bag for 1 or 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a little older, my mother would make me a bologna sandwich and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and would throw some kind of chips in there. I don't think there was fruit in the bag. I enjoyed school. We went to kissing parties in our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I don't know that our parents knew we were kissing girls, but...
And these were called kissing parties, like...
Well, that's what I call them.
Yeah.
They had some other... They were a party. And so... I remember Mrs. Jacobus calling my mother when I was 5,
mm-hmm.
that she had found me in the closet with her 5-year-old daughter, Alicia, kissing.
At age 5, both of you?
At age 5. Sent me right home. So I graduated from Mountainside.
In what year?
In 1952. And we sang the Star Spangled Banner or My Country 'Tis of Thee every morning and read one of the Psalms. In those days, that was common. I went to an integrated school. There were black kids in our grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot, but it seemed natural to me. And then I went to a regional high school that had 7 towns in it.
Wow.
Mountainside, Berkeley Heights, New Providence, Springfield, Clark, Garwood, Kenilworth. And so it was a large metropolitan high school, 4 years. I played freshman basketball. I had a real good set shot.
Two-handed?
Two-handed.
So, was it?
No, it was not that. No.
Okay.
If you got in close, you did one hand, but you're out.
Okay.
I went out for freshman basketball, and now I'm playing with kids from 7 towns, some black. I started out as 5th man on the team. By the end of the freshman season, I was 8th man. And I knew I probably wasn't going to make the freshman varsity. I had a few problems. I was short. I was slow. And I couldn't jump. Other than that, I had a good shot.
Okay.
And meanwhile, I did well academically. I then went out for wrestling and was a member of the team. Going to wrestle at either 158 or 165. And 1 week before the first meet, I was wrestling in practice with a guy who weighed 260 pounds, who was our super heavyweight. And he did a move which is called a switch on me, where he traps your arm and then weights you down. I'd have to get down on the ground to show it to you. And I tried to resist him, and I totally dislocated my shoulder.
Oh.
And was out for the rest of the season. And so I do basketball for 1 year, I'm done. Do wrestling for 1 year, I'm done. And by that time, I was active in the orchestra and the marching band. I played first chair trumpet in the band. And
yeah, when did music come into your life? I mean, was that just something that your parents had you do?
That. No, I started playing the trumpet when I was like 8 years old.
Yeah.
And loved it and was fairly good at it. I never was great, but I was fairly good at it. And then during my high school years, I played, a bunch of us started a dance band, which we called the Stardusters. Mason Ahern on the piano, Chicky Angeliri on the drums, who was on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour at 5 years old as a child drum prodigy. Teddy Cabista on the tenor sax, Cliffy Robinson on the alto sax, Joe Papadoc on the trombone, who was about 5'1", and could hardly reach the 7th position on the trombone, and Joel Jennings on the trumpet. And we played dances. We were hired for Friday or Saturday night dances, mostly school dances.
So start in the middle of high school, you guys would do this?
Yeah. And we practiced every Saturday. We had sheet music that we bought at the music stores that was orchestrated for all those different instruments. So all we had to do was read it. And we played typically 3 one-hour sets where you play for 45 minutes and you're off for 15 minutes. And each of us made $3 or $4.
Yeah.
To play for the evening. And I loved it. I loved that. That was fun. So. And at the high school football games, I was not a cheermaster, but I had my trumpet at the high school football games, and I would play da 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 da, yay, da 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 da, yay, da 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 da, yay, da 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 da, and then everybody would scream.
Yeah. So you'd lead the.
Well, I did with my trumpet. I'd stand
trumpet
up
cheer.
Yeah. And when you're playing a horn outside just sounds like Gabriel in heaven. It's just, the sound is enormous and clear and crystalline. And I'm forgetting all sorts of things. I got my license when I was 17. We had one car in the house. I had to borrow my parents' car occasionally if I was going to drive. I don't remember ever getting a ticket or having an accident at that time.
Did you ever move? I mean, I know you said you moved.
No, we stayed we moved when I was 3.
To Mountainside, yeah.
And we stayed in the same. My parents stayed in the same house until they retired.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I look back. I look back on my K through 8 years as much more satisfying than my 9 through 12 years. And I look through my college years as more satisfying than my high school years. And not that I didn't like high school, but I think from K through 8, I was sort of innocent, and I was sort of important in the school in all regards. When I went to Jonathan Dayton Springfield Regional High School, I later found out, I never asked, I never heard anybody talk about it, I later found out that Jonathan Dayton was a former governor of the New Jersey and was a signer of the Constitution.
Wow.
I only found that out about 10 years ago. I finally said to myself, I wonder who Jonathan Dayton was. So I graduated in 1956. One of the schools I had applied to, which I was accepted at, was Cornell. And unbeknownst to me, I was working for the County Park Commission summers, and I had to get out 2 weeks before school was over to start my job with the Park Commissioner. I couldn't have it. My mother took me to see the principal. The principal allowed me to do that. Well, on my graduation, during the day I wasn't there. I was working in one of the county parks. They gave the Cornell alumni of the state of New Jersey came up and awarded me the Cornell Cup. And I wasn't there, and no one ever told me about it. And I still have the vestiges of the Cornell Cup downstairs.
Like all the
maybe I threw it out.
The things that came with the cup.
Well, no, just the cup with the red C on it.
Oh, so it was just a little goblet. It wasn't like a.
No, it was like a trophy.
Like a trophy.
Yeah, with handles on it.
You still have it downstairs?
I do. Unless I just recently cleaned out the basement. It doesn't have the handles on it anymore. When we're done this, I'll get it to show you. Wow. So I have no idea what that was for. And I didn't go. I wound up not going to Cornell. My parents couldn't afford it. I don't remember anybody ever saying to me, "Apply for a scholarship." And I grew up. My mother only took me to church every Sunday. I went to an Episcopal church in Westfield, New Jersey, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. I was an acolyte, which is the Episcopal Church equivalent to a Catholic altar boy, and served the communion cup and wafers to the priest who then served it, or came in carrying the cross. Had to carry the cross like this.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because my spiritual life became so important to me later on in life. But I have to look back and say, when I was going to church, I probably didn't have a spiritual bone in my body. If someone had said to me, "Do you believe in Christ?" I would have said, "Well, yeah." And there was sort of an intellectual assent. There was emotional. There was no emotional. There was no will. There was no heart connection to the love of God at that particular time. But I remember there were some cute girls in the youth group at St. Albans.
That helps.
Or at St. Paul's.
Tell me a little bit about your brother. What was the meanest thing your brother ever did to you?
Well, the scariest thing was...
How many years apart were you guys?
5.
5 years apart.
And I had a sense that he saw me as mostly a nuisance.
As most big brothers see their little brothers, yes.
When I'm 8, he's 13. He's thinking about girls, I'm thinking about cars.
Yeah. Well,
I think of a couple things. One, he would often come in the bedroom at night with the lights out, and there'd be just a little shadow of a light out in the hallway. He'd put his hands up and start walking toward Dracula or Boris Karloff, and go, "Ah! And I'd yell, "Dick, don't!" And I knew it was him, but it just was petrified. And then he'd come over and he'd pounce on me and rough me up. And then I remember playing basketball with him in the back driveway. By the way, we had a gravel driveway, so dribbling on a gravel driveway is really pretty challenging.
Yeah.
But I'm playing basketball with him, and I was guarding him, and he had pimples, like a lot of us do at a certain age. And I hit his face, and I broke a pimple on his face. And he was just furious. Just absolutely furious with me. I was going to disfigure his face. And he started punching on me. And I don't know what happened, but he would often, if we got into a little battle, he'd say, let's go down on the rug and wrestle. So we go down into the living room on the rug in front of the fireplace and start to wrestle. And it was no contest. I don't think I was whiny, but I probably was. I don't think I blamed him for everything, but I should have. And, it's interesting. I really admire your parents for it, your relationship with your brother and your sister. I'm not suggesting it's perfect. I know it's not. You guys have your moments. And I'm not trying to idolize it. But I would say you and Willie are close. May not love each other all the time, but you're close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my brother and I ever were close. We were friends and respectful, and I talked to my brother often. He's very shy. In the last 20 years, I don't think he's ever called me. But that doesn't mean that I'm more friendly than he is. I'm an outgoing personality. He's introverted, and he often will say to me, Joel, I just know you're so busy, I don't want to interrupt you. And I say, Dick, you're my brother. Call me. And I know he's probably not going to.
Mm-hmm.
But that's his personality.
Mm-hmm. Where does Dick live now?
He lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's in assisted living. As you know, he's got this terrible brittle bone disease, and he's just all hunched over. And he's 5 years older than me. I'm 77, so he's 82. I'm surprised he's not in a wheelchair, but he's still not. But my brother was very smart. He got a PhD from the University of Illinois, taught engineering for 37 years, as a professor at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, a very prestigious school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chairman of the Charlottesville, Virginia School Board for like 12 years.
Yeah.
Wrote a lot of important research papers on space flight and earthquakes on dome-shaped buildings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother got me the job at the Park Commission. Then the other summer I worked for the Uniontown Consolidated Gas Company in the county of Union, New Jersey. And I drove around in a panel truck for the whole summer with one guy who was a full-time employee. And we mapped all the manhole covers and access to the sewers in the county. We walked every street because they didn't have any record where the manhole covers were. So if there was snow and there was a gas leak, they had no idea where to get in. So we had to measure with a regular tape measure from the corner this way, corner that way, where each manhole cover was. We're also supposed to test for gas, see if there's a gas leak, and probably 4 or 5 times that summer we found a gas leak. And they told us, no cell phones, stop immediately what you're doing, get to the nearest payphone and call us, because they don't want to blow up the house.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Tell me about how you got into the University of Wisconsin.
Well, I applied to the University of Wisconsin and was accepted. It was a very relatively inexpensive school for an out-of-state person.
Was it
Parents
public?
were limited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Parents had limited means. I had a requirement to earn a certain amount of money every summer. But I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and my parents drove me out. And because my brother was an ATO, member of the ATO fraternity, he called and they had a couple of rooms that were not occupied by members of the fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
So he got me a room in my freshman year at the ATO house. So that when I went through Rush, which I did, I really wasn't able to be objective because I'd come back from rushing Chi Psi or Phi Delta Theta or Sigma Chi, and I'd eat with these guys, these 30 guys, and of course you're going to pledge ATO, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to.
They didn't want you to?
I know I didn't want to.
Oh, you didn't want to?
But I didn't have the courage to not. And I had a good experience. In fact, I'm going to a reunion in about 10 days.
Oh, really?
Of my fraternity brothers. We're all close to 80 now. And that was a good experience. But unbeknownst to me, you could drink at the University of Wisconsin when you were 18. It was 3-2 beer. All the fraternities had beer in their house in the basement in kegs. So you could have a beer anytime you wanted, which is not a good thing for 18-year-old boys. But I majored in business. I met my current wife, Mary Lee, my senior year.
Yeah, tell me about that night.
Well, I had, at the urging of a friend of mine, with little or no background, but I'd done some things. I was very strong at that particular time, and had a lot of strength. A friend of mine named Pudge Fox, of all names, invited me to go out for gymnastics. So I went out for gymnastics and found out I liked it and was reasonably good at it.
When was this? When you got to the university?
Yeah, when I got to the university.
Uh-huh.
And so it's one of those varsity sports, but it was what you would call a minor varsity sport, where they didn't have 100 guys in line trying to get one position, like the football team.
Right.
So, and a lot of the kids that I competed with had gymnastics background, so it wasn't, even though I competed my junior and senior year, it wasn't until my senior year that I got a varsity letter. But the reason I tell you that, I was coming back from gymnastics practice, and at the University of Wisconsin there were parties held in the fall called beer suppers between a sorority and a fraternity. The fraternity was the host. The fraternity would provide the beer and the soft drinks. The sorority would bring food. And I'm coming down the stairs at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock after gymnastics practice, and the party had already started, and I go in the bar room, and there are these 3 girls standing around talking, and no guy in the group. And I go over, and I look around, and I say, well, by far the cutest girl here is this girl, Mary Lee Russell. And I asked the girls if they wanted a drink, which was the courtesy, and I don't even, Lee basically doesn't drink. She'll have a glass of wine. I don't remember if she had a beer or soft drink or whatever. And we talked for a while, and then we had dinner, and then we went up into the chapter room, and we played record players, and we danced.
Oh.
Mostly jitterbug stuff. And I found out she was a great, great dancer. And I wasn't very good, but I had rhythm. And she made me feel good and look good on the dance floor. So from there, blossomed a romance. One of the funny stories we tell is that night when I first met her and danced with her, I walked her back to the sorority house, and I tried to kiss her.
You didn't get it, did you?
And she pushed me away. She said, "I don't kiss boys on the first date." And she later said to me, "You know what? That wasn't even a date. I mean, I have to go out with you 3 times to get a kiss."
We just met.
And then the other humiliation was I finally got the courage and I called her. I said, I'm calling to see if you'd like to go out for something to eat or go to a movie on Friday night. She said, "I have a date." So I got my courage up and stuffed my ego, and I said, basically showing I've got nothing going on. "Well, what about Saturday night?" "I've got a date." And then she has the audacity, the gall, the chutzpah to say to me, "But I'm not doing anything Sunday night." Knowing that Sunday night is the one night on the campus where the dorms and the fraternity houses don't serve a meal, so you got to go out and pay cash and buy food, of which I had very little.
Right.
And so we started dating, and the rest, as they say, the rest is history. But an interesting thing about dating her, I dated her, and then I graduated. Then I dated her through the summer, driving back and forth most weekends between northern New Jersey and Connecticut, where her parents lived, sometimes with a friend of mine, David Owens, in his little MGTD car with a top down. And but I didn't have, I liked her. I suppose I loved her. I didn't have no strong feelings. It was only after she went back to college at Wisconsin that all of a sudden just had this sick to my stomach feeling of, oh my gosh. And I realized that I loved her. And then I went to work for Alcoa. I went in the Army for a couple times, and we got married. We had 4 kids, and we lived happily ever after.